Okay, so hello there guys. Today I'm going to be doing a video about the best weapons for Eula. Now, recently I've seen a lot of discussion about Eula's weapons, especially on YouTube. On Reddit it's been there for a while, but on YouTube it's recently taken traction. And there are a lot of great videos about what weapons are the best for her, don't get me wrong. But there was a considerable lack of math in most of the discussions. So I thought, why the heck not do the math myself. This took quite a while to set up because Eula is quite a complex character. And yeah, so before I get into the spreadsheet, I chose 10 weapons specifically to calculate for because I think these are going to be the probably the 10 best contenders. Now first off we have this one, of course, Song of Broken Pines, the new weapon that's going to come for Eula. Wolf's Gravestone, Skyward Pride, Unforged, Snow Tomb Star Silver, Serpent Spine, Prototype Archaic, Lithic Blade, Royal Greatsword, and Skyrider Greatsword. Just why not? Most of you probably haven't really heard of this weapon since it's a 3-star weapon, but since it has physical damage bonus, I just kind of put it in there for memes. So this took quite a while to do, like an hour. It took around an hour to do, just like sitting there calculating a bunch of stuff. Now I do make an assumption here. It's not that big of an assumption. I'm just saying I'm only calculating for one cycle, which isn't that big of a problem for this video specifically, because I'm just trying to see the difference between the weapons, which the cycles won't matter because every cycle will give the same results, and every hit is a crit because I want to have fun. In sheet 2, that's where I put average damage, so stay tuned if you want to see the average damage, but for now we're gonna go assume all hits are crit, because sometimes average damage is very weird due to how crazy crit rate can influence the damage. So that's why I did this one first, where I assume all hits are crits, so it's a bit more consistent. So now here, if you notice right off the bat, these are the totals below here. Song of Broken Pines is the highest by a significant amount, 464,844 damage in one cycle. Skyward Pride is the lowest of the 5 stars. These are the 4 5 stars. Skyward Pride is at 366,921. Wolf's Gravestone is at 426,815. And the Unforged is also at 426,815. The reason they're the same is because if you look at Wolf's Gravestone and the Unforged, they're actually basically the same weapon, except for their second passive. So here, as you can see, the Wolf's Gravestone and the Unforged actually have the same exact attack stat and attack percent. I didn't realize this until a couple weeks ago when I was theorizing Eula in March, which is a pretty cool thing, that like 2 claymores have basically exactly identical stats. The passives are also very similar, because at Refinement 1, Wolf's Gravestone increases attack by 20%, and scoring hits on opponents increases attack by 4%, max 5 stacks. So they basically both have 20% attack as their first passive. The second passive is when it changes. The second passive of Wolf's Gravestone is a bit better, but the second passive of the Unforged is better if you have a shield character available, I would say. So the second passive difference is here. Now if you noticed, Wolf's Gravestone with the passive goes from 426,000 to 521,000. That's because his passive gives 40% attack, which is really good. And in fact, it's actually higher than the Song of Broken Pines by 60k. Although the passive doesn't activate that often, since you have to hit an enemy that's less than 30% HP. And if they're less than 30% HP, they're basically dead already. And the Unforged, if you have a shield character, what it does is it doubles the attack 20% into 40%, and it brings it up all the way to 491,473, which again also beats out Song of Broken Pines by 30k. However, if you've noticed how Skyward Pride is really low, right? That's actually because Skyward Pride, if I could search this up, Skyward Pride has energy recharge as its substat. Now this would not really matter most of the time. However, with Eula it does, because Eula's ult is 80 energy cost. So that's pretty dang impactful. And the passive as well is also really good because it increases all damage by 8% after using an elemental burst, normal, or charge attack on hit, creates a vacuum. Basically, if you do anything, she has a chance to create a vacuum. That's kind of like a thing where it attacks the enemy, and you can make 8 of them, and each of them lasts for 20 seconds. Now, here's Skyward Pride. I'm not exactly sure how to incorporate the energy recharge percent into it, so I just kind of multiplied the ult by the energy recharge, because we don't really have a good way. But if you do that, the damage becomes 488,000, which again is actually higher than Song of Broken Pines, which is actually very, very surprising. Because basically, what this means is that Song of Broken Pines isn't that necessary. Because the appeal of Song of Broken Pines is that it has high base attack. However, the thing is, Eula already has basically the second highest attack stat in the game. I think Xiao is the only one that actually has a higher attack stat than her, because she has a higher attack stat than Ganyu and Diluc, who used to be second. Yeah, because the thing is, as high as the attack stat of Song of Broken Pines is 741, that low substat really kind of hurts it. 20% physical damage. If it was like 30%, 40%, it would be absolutely monstrous. But Eula is extremely complex because of another part, her ult stacking. Now, based on footage that I've seen, if you play Eula optimally, at most you're going to get 15 stacks, barely. However, if you have Skyward Pride or Song of Broken Pines, you can actually get past 15 stacks. For Skyward Pride, that's a bit more hypothetical, but Song of Broken Pines, you can pass it because part of the passive of Song of Broken Pines increases normal attack speed by 12%. So you can get in more attacks, which give more stacks. Which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you go to look at Eula, the reason her ult is so strong is because damage per stack is so high. And if you can get some extra stacks, like for example, if you're using level 8 talent, you get 128% damage for free with 1 stack. And with 12% attack speed, you could probably get like 2 or 3 more stacks than you're supposed to, which will give you an extra 300% damage, which further complicates things. Because what that does is that now makes everything very close to each other. And yeah, attack speed is really weird, so I could not put it into calculation, which is another reason why this video is so late, because I really was trying to figure out how to put everything into math terms, but it's weird. So now, if you were to actually ask me, which of the 4 weapons, which of the 4 5-star claymores do I think is the best? If there's a certain thing that happens, Skyward Pride could actually be the best by far. If the vacuums that are generated from Skyward Pride can build stacks. Because technically they are attacks. If the vacuums can generate stacks, which actually now that I think about it, that can't happen. That doesn't work because in her ult description, it has to be Eula's own normal attack, elemental skill, and elemental burst that deals damage to opponents. So Skyward Pride's vacuum spawning probably does not generate stacks. If it did, it would be the best weapon for her, no doubt, no question. But right now, it's honestly quite a hard pick. I would say all the 5-star claymores currently are relatively equal, because in terms of damage, if all of their passives are unlocked, they deal very similar damage. Wolf's Gravestone probably deals the most, and then Song of Broken Pines does the second most, and Unforged does the third most. Actually, we can confirm that right now, if we add an extra 3 stacks. Let's see. So, divide by 15. times 18. If we add an extra 3 stacks... Oh geez. Oh my. Yeah, 509,000. So Song of Broken Pines does more damage than the Unforged with a shield character, but Wolf's Gravestone with the passive will do more. However, Wolf's Gravestone passive is really tough to pull off most of the time, especially in Abyss where you really need it, because Abyss, it seems like they're going to the route of like big boss monsters. So when you're at 30% HP, you've already exhausted a lot of the Abyss time. So it's not nearly as worth as like something more consistent. So right now, I would actually say Song of Broken Pines is the best 5-star weapon for her. Skyward Pride is probably the second best, just due to her 80 energy cost. The damage actually is also pretty comparable to the other 5 stars with the energy recharge. And the vacuums could end up working as well. Because another thing I haven't mentioned is that the vacuums of Skyward Pride, they scale off of physical damage, and they can actually crit. And since you're using Physical Goblet on Eula, and Eula has built-in crit damage, her vacuums are gonna be doing pretty mega damage. Okay, so I just went ahead and calculated. Each vacuum does 7,580 damage with the stats that I'm using. And you can have 8 of these, so if we multiply this by 8, we get 60,000. So if you have 8 vacuums, that's 60,000 damage right there, assuming it crits, of course. And if we add this to here, that actually goes up to 54,000, which brings it higher than Wolf's Gravestone, Unforged, and Song of Broken Pines. Again, this is a bit more theoretical because we don't really have a good way to put energy recharge into DPS. But yeah, I think this is the probably the best way. So in my opinion, I think Skyward Pride will be one of the 2 best options, along with Song of Broken Pines. Wolf's Gravestone is the 3rd, and the Unforged is the 4th. That's for 5 stars. Now, onto 4-star weapons. First off, Serpent Spine, assuming it has 5 stacks. The total damage it does is 351,000. Serpent Spine is really good. It seems a bit low on this table because this table assumes all crits. And Serpent Spine, one of Serpent Spine's big selling points is its crit rate. So when we go to the average table, you'll see it a lot higher. But just know Serpent Spine is one of the most consistent 4-star claymores. However, you have to make sure you have some sort of shield. If you're playing Xin Yan, as long as her shield is decent enough, because you want to play Xin Yan with Eula anyway, you might be able to get away with Serpent Spine having all 5 stacks. Because if you don't have all 5 stacks, it's not necessarily as good as other weapons like Snow Tomb Silver, since Snow Tomb Silver works so well. Now Snow Tomb Silver here, it has pretty high base attack for a 4-star. It has pretty good physical damage bonus for a 4-star again, and its passive is also really good, mainly because Eula's attack stat is so high. Since Eula's attack stat is so high, this 360% of attack actually becomes pretty insane. Or if you're using Refine 1, 200, and opponents affected by Cryo, normally it would only deal like 80% attack, but since you're using Eula, who has an E, that is Cryo, you can just do that, and then opponents affected by Cryo are dealt 200% of attack, pretty simply, which is really nice. But it's more so thanks to its high base stat and its physical damage bonus that it's actually one of the best 4-star fits for Eula. I would say if you... oh my. I would say that Serpent Spine is probably the best all-around 4-star weapon for Eula. But if you're going full free-to-play, or you want to see the highest potential, which is what this table is for, then Snow Tomb Silver is where it's at. But now here's Lithic Blade though. Lithic Blade is higher than Snow Tomb, but it has 2 stacks. The problem with that though is that I'm being very generous with the Lithic Blade. Because if we look up Lithic Blade real quick, Lithic Blade, Honey Impact. The base attack is nice, the attack percent is nice, but the passive. Refinement 1. For every character in a party, for every character in the party from Liyue, the character who equips this weapon gains 7% attack increase and 3% crit rate increase. There's a big problem with Lithic Blade. 2 stacks is super generous. Because the kind of team that you're going to be using for Eula, most of your characters are not going to come from Liu. Because you're going to use Xinyan, of course. Xinyan is number 1 choice because on her Ascension 4, yes, she increases 15% physical damage for every character, so she's a must. You are also going to use Fischl. You can also you could use Beidou. Yeah, you could use Beidou as your Electro, which means 1 Liu. But then, other than that, you don't really have a second Liyue character. Because like the other whatchamacallit? The other candidates are mostly from Mondstadt. Like if you want to run double Electro for extra energy, like Bennett Fischl. Fischl is from Mondstadt. Bennett is from Mondstadt. If you want to run Chongyun, that's also fine. But that's not really a... You could actually run Chongyun, probably. You can actually probably run Chongyun for that 2 Liu, because as long as you have 2 Liu characters, it's going to... Lithic Blade is going to outdamage Lithic Blade is going to outdamage most 4 stars here. All of them actually in this table. But if you're using Lithic Blade in a cryo-centered Eula, then it's actually very easy for her to get many stacks. Because if you're using her in a cryo team, you could bring like Beidou, Chongyun, and then Ganyu, and then that's 3 Liyue characters. Eula herself is Mondstadt, so she doesn't count to the Lithic Blade. But yeah, that kind of makes Lithic Blade a little bit weird, because Lithic Blade could be really good, but it depends really on your team's setup, which if you're playing physical Eula, most of the time you're only going to have 1 Liyue character. Royal Greatsword. Now, Royal Greatsword is more of a meme here. Royal Greatsword isn't that good, even if the numbers suggest that it's actually pretty okay. Because if we look at Royal Greatsword, right, the passive is basically almost useless. Like you should just use a Serpent Spine instead of a Royal Greatsword, because it increases crit rate by 8%, max 5 stacks. But as soon as you crit, the crit rate is gone. I'm not really too much of a fan of this passive. However, in calculation, it does come pretty well. So yeah, it's still okay. Royal Greatsword is pretty good, but when we get into the average damage table, it's gonna look really good because the passive is kinda nuts. But talking from a realistic standpoint, not really. In calculations, the passive is nuts, but in practicality, this usually is pretty useless. Now, Black Cliff Slasher. Black Cliff Slasher, surprisingly, did not do as much as I thought. Because if we look at Black Cliff, the base attack's pretty good, but that crit damage is so high. However, as we've learned from Ganyu and Hu Tao, who also have crit damage on their Ascension stat, when your crit damage gets too high, it kind of falls off unless you have the necessary attack to back it up. Which at that point you need like whale levels of attack. So 4 stars don't really cut it. 4-star weapons. Because if you're 200% crit damage, for example, which is very easy to get since she has crit damage built in, after 200% crit damage, your crit damage really falls off unless you have 2000 plus attack. And at that point, building attack is actually better. I've personally experienced this through playing and calculating for Ganyu and Hu Tao, and it's going to be the same for Hu Tao. So I guess it makes sense why Black Cliff was this low. I just did not expect it to be not. I just expected it to be like maybe equal to Snow Tomb, but I guess not. Prototype Archaic here. Prototype Archaic is also a pretty solid choice, mainly because Eula's attack stat is so high, and Prototype Archaic boosts attack percent in the substat. Prototype Archaic's passive is basically useless, so we can just kind of ignore it. And now Skyrider Greatsword, the meme, of course, if you want to use it for some reason. Skyrider Greatsword. If you want to use Skyrider Greatsword for some ever reason, then you could technically use it. 338. Okay, so yeah, I forgot to put it at Refinement 5. I calculated it at Refinement 1, but basically it's still the lowest by a significant amount, 343,707. So from this table, we can basically say that Snow Tomb Silver and Lithic Blade are the two best for maximum potential. And then there's Serpent Spine, and then there's everything else. Now, crit rate really messes with the numbers because you could, for example, like crit all the time on the ult, but not crit all the time but not crit as often on everything else, and then it just kind of falls apart. And average damage tends to make stuff like 70% crit rate look like god tier, but really 70% crit rate is almost useless practically, because if you have 50% crit rate or above, you're already critting like a ton. So that's why I did it with this first, and but obviously this is math, so I also had to do average damage table. Now in average damage table, things take a bit of a change. For the 5-star weapons, nothing really changes. They're kind of the same thing. Where like Skyward Pride is probably the best, along with Song of Broken Pines, and then Wolf's Gravestone is a second, and then Unforged is third. But here, Serpent Spine is a lot better. I use 45% crit rate base here because 45% is very achievable for most people. And at 45, Serpent Spine gets really high, so does Royal Greatsword. This is one of the reasons why I don't really like average damage too much, because it puts too much emphasis on crit rate, even though crit rate practically won't make this much of a difference, like Snow Tomb and Serpent Spine's only a 50,000 difference. However, it's fine because that's how math works. It's not always practical. So Serpent Spine, assuming 5 stacks, is amazing. Now, Serpent Spine, make sure you also have a shield character on, otherwise you're not going to have those 5 stacks pretty often. That's also something that's very important with Serpent Spine, and why I actually still slightly prefer Snow Tomb Silver. Because with Serpent Spine, you have to make sure your Xinyan shield is like really good, or you're using another shield character, which if you want to play her optimally, her optimal team is something along the lines of Eula Official / Beidou, Xinyan, or Bennett. You don't really have space for another shield character, is the problem. But still, Serpent Spine is an absolutely great choice. Snow Tomb Silver is also a really great choice with 230,000 here. It's kind of low. Basically, the weapons that don't have crit rate are much lower because that's how average damage works. So yeah, Snow Tomb Silver is here. Lithic Blade has crit rate on its passive, so that's why it's also kind of high. Black Cliff Slasher is 231. Prototype Archaic is 224, and Skyrider Greatsword, of course. So yeah, this is the average table, and this is also why I showed this one first, because this one would probably be a bit more aligned to how Eula actually feels when she gets play tested. Now the main reason I actually don't like average damage, even though average damage is mathematically more correct, the problem is average gets more correct as there are more hits and more time that passes. In Genshin Impact right now, you can kill everything in like 30 seconds most of the time if you've played this game long enough. So it doesn't really work because you don't do enough hits for the averages to actually kick in. So calculating this with all hits being crit is actually slightly more accurate, because like if you're 5-shotting something and most of your hits are crits, it's gonna be way higher than average damage. But yeah, that's just my opinion about it. I could be completely wrong for all I know because I'm an idiot. I used to be like really serious about average damage. I used to follow that like the gospel. But there aren't really any enemies that survive long enough for averages to actually kick in. So yeah, that's it for the video. I just wanted to make this video. Please do let me know if I made any errors, because I did all of this in roughly around an hour and 10 minutes, so I kind of rushed this. And again, Eula's not out yet, so these calculations are not final, but they basically are at this. But they basically are unless they change something with Eula. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful. My overall ranking, to summarize, I would put Skyward and Song of Broken Pines as number 1, Wolf's Gravestone as number 2, Unforged as number 3, Serpent Spine and Snow Tomb Silver as number 4, Lithic Blade at number 5, and then everything else is 6. Because they're kinda not really worth using, because Snow Tomb Silver is literally free.